Working as an emergency room medic for over 25 years, Dr. Jonathon Sullivan, affectionately known as Sully, came to identify a common factor in a lot of patients he was treating. He termed it the sick aging phenotype, and it applied to patients with metabolic syndrome, which leads to conditions like type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease. And he came to realise that for each of these patients, there was a particular prescription he wanted to give them, but couldn't as an ER doctor. That's what prompted him to write the book The Barbell Prescription, setting out the primary drivers of metabolic syndrome and sick aging, the role muscle plays in this, and how we can give ourselves the best chance of health span and quality lifespan. He's here today to share his story, his research, and the approach that's making a difference to the many clients he now works with at his famous Graysdale gym in Michigan, which was recently featured in the New York Times. For some, this could be a life-changing message, so do make time to listen to Dr. Sullivan and the fascinating insights he's gained from his years in both medicine and as a strength coach. Sully, thank you so much for being here. This is an interview I've really been looking forward to, I have to say.
I'm honored to have been invited. Thank you very much, Claire.
Well, I would love to start by hearing a little about your career in medicine, first of all, and what drew you to practice emergency medicine, and then what the pattern was that you began to see among a group of patients that would come through the doors of the ER.
Well, I wanted to be a doctor from the time I was a little boy. I was a little nerd child, and I grew up wanting to have a microscope, and I was fascinated with life sciences and all that growing up. And I served in the United States Marine Corps for 3 years out of high school because we didn't really have any money for college. But because of my service, I was able to afford it. And then I got into medicine with the idea that I would ultimately be a surgeon. And when I was a medical student in my third year, I was on the surgery service for about 36 hours, my first call. And I went home and I told my wife I'm not going to be a surgeon because I realized that was not a life for me. And after that, I kind of got pulled into emergency medicine, which was a very sort of exciting discipline, a very generalist discipline. You get to see all kinds of things. You get to do trauma resuscitations and cardiac resuscitations and take care of hangnails and deliver babies and deal with gunshot wounds and burns. And it's very exciting. When I was working as an attending physician in the emergency department, I began to appreciate that there were certain patterns of unhealthy aging that tended to go together. And I subsequently came to call that the sick aging phenotype. And that's the metabolic syndrome, which is diabetes and high blood pressure and heart disease, and visceral and truncal obesity, and high cholesterol, vascular disease, and frailty, which is the loss of muscle and bone tissue, which basically means you're easier to break, along with polypharmacy, which is basically being on too many medicines, polypharmacy, which is an epidemic in older populations, and medical dependence, where people basically, they spend a significant portion of their lives in and out of doctors' offices and hospitals and emergency departments and things like that. These things all tend to go together, and they have a significant negative impact on our quality of life as we enter our so-called golden years. I began to put all that together, and I found it pretty offensive.
But at that stage, when you were noticing this, at what point were you able to put together that actually muscle might play a significant role in this? Because we're hearing more about this now, but back sort of 10, 20, 30 years ago, really muscle didn't come into the equation when we thought of health.
I'm sad to say that when I was in medical school, we got hardly any exercise physiology at all. We got hardly anything about healthcare or preventative medicine at all. And when I did start thinking about this from a medical perspective, and also from a personal perspective, because I was starting to get older, I also looked at it through the prism of my research, which was about cell death in brain tissue after injury, and about how cells die and basically how brain cells kill themselves. And I saw some parallels between programmed cell death or apoptosis in the brain after an injury or after any other kind of injury, and in humans right, who kind of undergo a sort of human apoptosis. As we get older, we sort of like devolve and we lose tissue, and we sort of, our the second half of our life can be this process of like self-disassembly, which is what programmed cell death is. So I saw a kind of a parallel there, and that led me to the exercise science literature, which I'd kind of stumbled on in the course of my research anyway. And in the exercise science literature, I found a vast world of data that I'd never been exposed to as a physician about the importance of exercise, and particularly the importance of exercise in aging populations. And it was a real revelation to me. And so I began looking for patterns in that literature and ways that I could primarily impact myself and perhaps my patients. And that led me on this whole journey that ultimately culminated in this clinic and the book that I wrote and what's become a second career of doing exercise medicine with older adults.
And at what stage in life were you at when you really made the key connection between
I was
sort of
pushing
muscle and
50.
health?
I was in my late 40s, and I was an extremely hardworking and ambitious individual. I was working at one of the most difficult emergency departments. I was also teaching, and I was also doing research. And I wasn't, ironically enough, taking particularly good care of myself. I tried, but and like most people in that time, and especially like most Marines, I thought that cardio was the be all and end all. Maybe with some calisthenics, so you could do your push-ups and stuff like that. I never really understood the importance of muscle and bone to unhealthy aging and function. And then I think that there were a few final nails in the coffin that we can talk about. The first was that I basically encountered Mark Ripito and his starting strength system, which I found as a physician and as a scientist to be quite rational. And I bought the book and I started using the program in myself and some family and friends. And it was the most amazing medicine, quite frankly, I had ever worked with in my entire life. And I appreciated its medical attributes, almost like if you analyzed it as a drug. I appreciated the attributes of strength training very early on. And I came across a subset of the literature, Peterson et al. And many others now, who had identified that muscle was not just a motor organ, but also a gland. It's an endocrine organ. It's the most massive gland in the body, along with your skeleton and fat tissue. These are three major endocrine organs that don't just talk to the rest of the endocrine system and therefore to the entire body, but they also talk to each other and they signal each other. And the endocrine profile of muscle and bone and fat can be healthy and anti-inflammatory and health promoting, or it can be pro-inflammatory and unhealthy. You can imagine that if that gland is sick, well, then you're going to be sick too. And the best way for that gland to get sick is to not use it, right? To have weak, fatty, floppy, sick gray muscle is a really good way to be sick as you get older.
Which will be quite new to a lot of people. I mean, maybe some of the people that follow you and I will be becoming more familiar with this. But I mean, I understood that, for instance, muscle is a store of glucose. So, somebody with my minimal knowledge of medicine, I could understand that as a store of glucose, it helps us regulate our blood sugar. And I know that blood sugar, if it's unregulated, is a major driver of age-related disease.
Correct.
So is that one of the biggest ways, or what are some of the other kind of biological pathways?
Yeah, there's some really cool stuff about glucose and insulin and blood sugar. It is, as you
Mm,
say, a store of glucose. That is, if it's been properly trained. If our muscles are
mm,
properly trained, they're going to have a fair amount of glycogen in them, which is basically animal starch, and starch is just a bunch of little glucose molecules all pinned together, right? So it's a
okay.
ready supply of glucose. The other place where you store glycogen is in your liver, and the liver and the muscle and the fat are all exquisitely insulin sensitive tissues, or at least they should be. Unfortunately,
Hmm.
in older adults, they often are not. And so they can be insulin resistant tissues in people who have the metabolic syndrome and who are on a path of unhealthy aging, where the muscle and the liver and other tissues are resistant to insulin signaling, and that's prediabetes and diabetes, type 2 diabetes. You you make insulin, but your tissue, at least at first, but your tissues don't respond to it appropriately. And so you have a harder time regulating your blood glucose. When you are engaged in vigorous exercise, glucose uptake into the muscle is insulin independent. So right now, when we're just sitting here, for us to take glucose from breakfast and put it into our muscle tissue to store it as glycogen, or into our fat tissue and store it as fat, that requires insulin. Insulin says, "Hey, here's a bunch of glucose. You need to, open your loading dock, and we'll bring it on in." Of course, that's harder to do if you don't have good insulin signaling.
Mhm.
But when you're actively engaged in exercise, you don't need insulin to take glucose from the bloodstream into the muscle tissue. That transport is insulin independent. So you're able to open up those insulin channels, or those glucose channels, so glucose can get in the muscle. You can see then how vigorous exercise would help control blood glucose, at least during exercise, even though you're not insulin sensitive. But the downstream effect of that is that the muscle sees that it needs to open those insulin channels more and more frequently, and it develops more insulin channels, so you can take up more glucose even without insulin when you're exercising. But having more of those channels in your muscle makes you more insulin sensitive. So then, even at rest, you're more insulin sensitive, which is a good thing. And the same thing
Yeah.
happens in your other tissues as well. Muscle tissue is a vast, or should be a vast, landscape of insulin receptors and glucose transporters, making you more sensitive to insulin signaling. That's just one of the million ways that exercise makes us healthier, and not just at the mechanical level, but also at the metabolic level.
And it makes me think, you always hear people talking about, young people and how they can eat whatever they like and they don't put on weight and so on. Now, is muscle playing a massive role in that? So these young people that have healthy muscle mass, this is what's helping to regulate their metabolic health.
It's multifactorial. Muscle is definitely part of it. Part of it is that
Hmm.
they're using their muscle, right? They're using it more avidly. Younger people, this is a gross generalization, but younger people tend to move around more. They tend to exercise
Yeah.
more. They tend to be more active. So there's that. But it's a complex of other things as well. It has to do with mitochondrial health. It has to do with endocrine health. And it has to do with simply the fact that throughout your childhood and adolescence and your young adulthood through your 20s, you're still growing and you have a high basal metabolic rate. That's a
Yeah.
crude measure, but as you pass, what evolution considers to be reproductive age, well, after that, nature kind of doesn't care about you and your metabolism, and so your metabolism kind of drops out from underneath you, especially if you're not using it, and your muscle drops out. Like what I like to say is, if you abandon your body, it will abandon you.
And we really see that, as we get into later life. Um, how does muscle impact brain health? This is one of the things that fascinates me most, that we're beginning to see the correlation between muscle mass and some of those diseases that we fear, like dementia and so on. I mean, what is the connection there?
I think I would say connections, not connection, and I think they are manifold and incredibly complex. We're just now
Yeah.
beginning to tease all this out, but there are some putative connections that definitely seem to be there. You are opening up neurological spaces when you train that may have been long neglected. So you are using your brain to basically program new movement patterns, right? And new ways of moving and proprioception. So you're basically integrating with your physical body in a way that perhaps you've neglected for many years. And so that gives your brain additional tasks to perform, and the brain, crudely speaking, can be regarded as a kind of a tissue that has to be trained. The other thing that's happening is all the metabolic benefit that's coming from training, and that anti-inflammatory signaling from the muscle tissue and from the fat tissue that we promote when we train. And then I think that there are even deeper neurobiological connections when people train, like your parents in that beautiful video that you made, right? What I see when I look at that video is what I see all the time. I mean, you're talking about like the tears of joy from your parents, right? And it just, what a beautiful experience it was in that beautiful video. Well, I get to do that for a living. I get to do that all day long. And what's happening is people change their perception of who they are, right? Their identity changes. And we actively cultivate that here at Graceville. We tell them, like, you're an athlete now. You're an athlete of aging. You're engaged in the most extreme sport of all, which is getting older. You have to train for it. You have to be strong for it. When your identity changes like that and you become less, involuting and less, sort of like falling into yourself like a dying star, and instead you start to shine again, that's going to have knock-on effects for the way that you cognitively process the world. You're going to be more engaged with it. So that's a long-winded way of answering a question by saying I think it's a manifold at multiple different scales of neurobiological and neuropsychiatric organization that are causing that deep connection between mind and body in the athlete of aging.
And you've struck on something so interesting there that I do see with my own parents, because, when they came into this before they had started weight training, like so many people in later life, they were facing decline and they didn't think there was any other option. I mean, this is something, just thought, we're just going to have to suck this up. And, aging's not for the faint-hearted, as my grandfather used to say. And when they started to train, felt themselves getting stronger, felt some of that power come back, I think I wouldn't say they were depressed before, but I think there was something nagging at them in that aging process of, this is it. We're kind of wrapping up here. It's something that's kind of hard to define and often very unspoken, but among families, we sort of feel it between ourselves. And to watch them come back to life in a way, and that confidence come back, is feeling that they have a future once again, feeling that holidays that they once thought, we probably wouldn't manage to go there, suddenly that's back on the table again. I mean, you can see how the mind starts to burst into life again and think, new possibilities.
There's a deeply existential sort of component to this, because you're right. People sort of like give up. Well, like, my life is basically over. I'm in my 70s or my 60s, or like, as an emergency physician, I saw it all the time. People just give up on themselves. But the thing about training, we tell people to exercise, but the thing about training is that training, unlike exercise itself, the goal is like, well, I'm going to go get hot and sweaty. My doctor told me I should exercise, so I'm going to go and I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to have a bag of Cheetos and watch TV, right? Whereas training and being an athlete is an explicitly goal-directed thing. now you have a direction. You're heading in a direction. You're going to accomplish this, and then you're going to accomplish that, and then you're going to accomplish this other thing, all on the road towards seeing like your parents. How much can I'm starting to wonder how much can I do, right? Because all of a sudden the opportunities start to open up. And when people get in their late 60s and 70s and 80s, they don't see opportunities opening up. They see they see doors closing. When we get people in here, we're like with your parents, we open doors for them. We give them a horizon of potentialities that they weren't confronting before. Instead of a dark horizon, there are roads. And the other thing that happens there is that I always like to tell people that we have a noble lie in our civilization, which is that we tell people from the time that they're little kids, hey, if you just show up and work hard, there'll be lots of opportunities and you'll get success. Well, that's a lie. Right? We know that that's not true. You do have to do those things. They are necessary, but they're not sufficient, right? You also need good luck, and you also need, time and patience and the right environment. But the gym is this kind of magical environment where if you show up and you work hard, right, and you do things right, you will get rewarded. And so it's a way to put people in the second half of life into an environment where they can do the work and get the reward immediately, and they see that there's a huge potential. You basically give them back something that looks like a future.
So you began this for yourself in your 50s, and then when did you decide to leave medicine? Because that must have been a big decision to say, right, I'm going to walk away from the career that I've loved and that I'm hugely respected for, and I'm going to become a strength coach. What made you take that leap?
Yeah, don't think for a minute that I wasn't told that I was crazy by a lot of people. So I started this practice in 2013 or 2014, and I was doing some coaching before that, and I did other forms of exercise before that. I was trying to get back some fitness in my late 40s, but I had no plan. I didn't know what I was doing. I opened the practice basically as a sideline, not even as a business. I wanted to train. I wanted to have some good equipment. I wanted to coach other people because it was fun. And it started to grow and really get away from me, and I had to move into a bigger space. And I wrote a book about strength training for older adults because that's just how I learn about things. I learn about things by writing about them. I write essays, or I write papers, or I write books. So I wrote this book, and Mark Ripito published it, and so we were more visible, and people started to come around, and I had to move into an even bigger space. And so then it gets to be 2018, late 2018, early 2019, and I'm old. I'm in my late 50s. I'm 58. And
Still young at 58.
But I'm still working midnights in the ER, and I asked to be released from midnights, and they said no. And that kind of made up my mind for me. I had 25 good years in emergency medicine. I'm very proud of the career. I'm proud of the lives that I saved, and the limbs that I saved, and the eyes that I saved. But I was getting tired. And precisely because I was an athlete at that point and training hard and working with other athletes, and because athletes have a training log, I could see what happened to my performance, to my physical performance and health after a midnight shift. I wouldn't be the same for weeks, right? And then it would be time for another midnight shift. I could see my physical performance doing this, and my mental performance too. So I decided it was time, and I cast my lot with this clinic that I had started, and I've never looked back.
And you mentioned your book there, The Barbell Prescription. What were really the key messages that you wanted to get across to people from that book?
I wanted to write the definitive text on this issue. And I think I did, and I think it still is. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that I had a wonderful co-author, Andy Baker, who wrote the programming section of the book, or he provided the programs and we wrote the programming section together. He's a master programmer, and he taught me, he was one of my teachers when I was getting into this, trying to learn how to do strength training for older adults, because there are differences, and you talk about some of these quite beautifully in your video. You talk about the adaptations that have to be made, the accommodations that have to be made for older adults. So I wanted to write it, and I wanted to write the why, like why you have to do this, why getting old doesn't have to be a process of getting progressively sicker and sicker. I wanted to why exercise is the best medicine for healthy aging, why the best formulation of that medicine is strength training, and why barbells are the best route of administration for that particular formulation of exercise medicine. And so that's the first part of the book. The second part of the book is, what are the overall contours of what a strength training, barbell-based strength training practice for older adults should look like. And so we sketched that out, why we use these particular exercises, the exercises that your parents are using. Why do we use those exercises? Why do we program them the way that we do? What's involved in recovery, which is really the linchpin of the entire thing, right? You don't get stronger by lifting weights, you get stronger by recovering from lifting weights. And it's recovery that brings in all of the lifestyle factors. It's recovery that brings in the proper nutrition and the hydration and the active rest and a nap and good sleep and avoidance of toxins and all of that. So I always like to say that exercise is part of a healthy lifestyle, but training is a healthy lifestyle because it integrates everything. So that was part two. And then part three was the programs. That's where we got down to the nubby nitty gritty, like what you talked about in your video. Like it's, 3 sets of 5 reps, increasing the weight a little bit at a time every session or every other session. And that's your linear progression. And later on, how things keep getting a little bit more complicated, because as you get closer to your age-adjusted genetic potential, you have to get a little bit more complicated with your programming. No problem. We can help you with that. I think we did a pretty good job, and I think that the book has influenced a lot of people, and I like to think that it's helped. It's like helped to push the zeitgeist in the direction that you're indicating here, that this is the way to go for healthy aging. Conditioning is important, mobility is important, but strength training is the cornerstone of exercise medicine for healthy aging. There's no doubt in my mind.
And you mentioned the barbell there as really being the most effective route to building strength. I get challenged a lot as to why we've gone down this particular route. I know you all say route over there, this particular route for my parents, and particularly on the deadlift. I've been hearing this quite a bit this week alone, actually.
Sure.
Why do you have to do the deadlift? You're really gonna, somebody was saying you're really gonna injure your parents doing that. I don't go back every single time, but sometimes it gets me thinking, oh, well, why are we doing the deadlift? Is there some truth in that? Can you put us right on that, Sully?
Sure. So we actually did an episode some years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and it was one of our older lifters, and she was pulling a particularly heavy barbell in the deadlifts, like you are, and the comments were like, you are just going to hurt that poor old lady.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, she's been with us for 6 or 7 years now, and she's pulled over 200 pounds in competitions. So I'm figuring this catastrophe should befall her any day now.
200 pounds. That's what my dad's doing now.
And I've been involved in some pretty contentious arguments about this as well. Mm-hmm. And I think that the squat is the cornerstone, but the squat is the king, but the deadlift is the queen. And like many queens, she's a mother. She's a very difficult lift, right? But absolutely essential. Here's the thing that's happening with the deadlift. First of all, the deadlift is just about anybody can do it, right? The range of motion that's required is not that extensive. And almost anybody can bend over and pick something up. And if they can't, then they really need deadlifts. So you have to work them down to a regular deadlift. But the real thing about the deadlift is this is not about lifting the bar. The deadlift is not about lifting the bar. The deadlift is about organizing your back. It's about transforming your back from a force absorber into a force transmitter. I mean, if you think about what's happening with the deadlift, you're generating a force with your legs against the floor, right? Against the ground reaction force. You're generating a force. That force is transmitted through your spine and your shoulder chassis down your arms to the weight in your hands. Otherwise, it wouldn't be lifted. That force has to be faithfully, your back becomes a kind of an axle or a crane, right? It doesn't develop the force. That's the mistake that people make. Your back is not developing the force. Your legs are developing the force, and your back is just staying strong and rigid and transmitting that force to the barbell so that you can lift it. And once you learn how to do that, once you learn how to convert your back from a force absorber to a force transmitter, well, then you are cooking with gas, because then, by definition, you have a strong back. And who doesn't want a strong back, right? The back is and the back performs this task in all of the barbell exercises. In all of the barbell exercises, even in the bench to a degree, the spine is acting as a force transmitter. When you learn how to transform your spine into a force transmitter, which is what it's for, right? Then you are just by definition more athletic.
It's superb stuff. I mean, we've seen it close up and in person. The other thing I get asked a lot, and this is the one that kind of breaks my heart a bit, and I get people emailing me. I'm sure you're the same. I get people messaging me on Instagram and commenting. Either it's that they're in their 60s or 70s and they want to do this themselves and they've no idea where to start or who to go to, what should they do, or they're desperate to see their parents do this and where on earth do they take them? They'll say, please help me find somebody for my mum. I find that so difficult. What advice do you give to people when you get asked that question? Where do they start?
It is heartbreaking, and that's the bottleneck in the delivery system for this particular form of training. And so I have a number of solutions, none of which are perfect. One of them might be to just come see me, but then you have to live in Southeast Michigan, and we're full. So the other option is to get an online coach like Chris Reese. That's, I assume he's through Starting Strength Online Coaching.
Yeah.
I can also recommend Barbell Logic Online Coaching.
Okay.
You can also recommend Starting Strength gyms and Starting Strength coaches. There are some Starting Strength coaches in the United Kingdom, the last time I checked.
Yes, that's right.
And all through Europe, and there are even some like in Singapore and Korea, and so they're all over the world now. And so increasingly, this is becoming available. But if it's not, you just have to do something that will ultimately be very good for you. You have to do your homework. You have to read the books, right? That means, and not sound self-serving, but that means my book and Mark Ripeto's book, Starting.
Yeah, I'm going to have them linked below.
You need to read those two books. You need to read them both. And then you need to look at the mountains of video resources that are available to you from Starting Strength, from Barbell Logic, from the Graysteel channel that we produce here on the way to do these lifts properly. And then you need to get some friends and a video camera and a rack and a barbell and some plates and just get started on your own, right? It's not ideal. The complete system is you and a coach, but the coach can be a good friend who's learning with you. And if you're alone, the coach can be the coach in your back pocket, your cell phone, and then you compare what you're doing with what you have learned is the proper form. As you put it so beautifully in your video, you start low and you go slow. You have to have patience. You have to be judicious. And then what you'll find is that there are resources. There are people who will give you, there are places like our Facebook page here at Graysteel where, we have a Patreon Facebook page. You can come in and we'll give you a form check, right? And or you can travel and do a consultation one of the starting strength coaches in the United Kingdom or here in the United States. We have people come from all over the world to visit us here at Graysteel and get consultation. There are resources. You can make it happen. I wish there were more facilities and people involved to sort of streamline the approach for people to get into this form of training. But at the end of the day, this is life-changing medicine. And if you don't have immediate access to coaching, you just have to make it happen one way or the other. You have to make it happen for yourself.
I think of our healthcare system here in the UK. It's quite different, obviously, in the US, where it's a private system. But I think of our overwhelmed National Health Service here in the UK with an elderly, unhealthy aging population. And I think if subsidised access to strength training were made available for over 50s here in the UK, in the US, in other countries around the world, wouldn't we all love to see that? Something on every corner. I mean, what do you think the future of healthcare would look like if this became widely appreciated among all of us, that this is the thing we need to do if we want to age well? Not everybody would take it up, but a lot of people would if it was widely and easily available and they got put into a program and off they went. What could healthcare look like if we were able to crack that nut?
The healthcare system, I can't speak to the United Kingdom, but the healthcare system in the United States is displaying its own kind of sick aging phenotype, if you will, right? We need to fix our emphasis. Our emphasis is on sick care. I remember once I got into a little trouble. One of the leaders of my specialty came to speak at our grand rounds, and he said, we have emergency physicians in Congress. Emergency physicians occupy high places in government and consulting and everything. Basically, what I said, emergency medicine has become the most important specialty in American healthcare. And I remember I got in a little bit of trouble, and I said, you make that sound like it's a good thing. It's not a good thing. That is not a good thing at all. Right? That's like saying that SWAT is the cornerstone of your community policing, right? That means that we've failed at some sort of fundamental level. Emergency medicine should be a fringe thing, right? It should be a fringe thing. The center of our healthcare should be preventative care and exercise medicine and nutrition medicine and primary care. Unfortunately, we're just heavily invested on both sides of the pond. We're heavily invested in this Anglo-American sick care model. And it no longer serves us well. Don't get me wrong, right? If I have appendicitis or I've been shot or I've been stabbed or I'm in a car accident or I'm having a stroke, something like that, take me to a younger counterpart of this guy right here, practicing down at receiving. Take me to my old shop, put me under the care of one of these people that I taught how to do what I used to do, right? You need emergency medicine for that. But most healthcare should be primary care, preventative care, and lifestyle medicine. Lifestyle medicine is the key. Finally, if I've done my sums right, do I put you mid-60s now if you were around 58 in 2018? Is that right? 65. I just turned 65 a couple months ago. Just a young thing. How do you think barbell training has served you? What are the benefits for you that you experienced? When I took up barbell training in my late 40s, I was overweight. I was weak. I hurt all the time. I hurt everywhere all the time. I've been a martial artist all my life, but I was starting to not do that stuff anymore. It made me too sore. I was tired all the time. I did not eat well. I didn't have a fitness program that integrated everything, that brought all the lifestyle factors together. It's changed my physical reality. It's changed who I am physically. It's changed who I am professionally. It's changed the way I look at life, the universe, and everything, as Douglas Adams put it, right? It's had a deep existential impact on me, as we spoke about earlier. It's basically transformed my entire world. And so what are you benching? People want to know, what kind of weights are you doing? I'm actually in the phase of my training cycle. I have a pretty complicated training cycle right now because I'm kind of running hard to stand still. So couple of days ago, I deadlifted 385 pounds. I'm hoping to get.
Jeepers creepers.
I try to get 405 once a year, but I make it less and less often now. So I might have to be happy with 385 this year. We'll see. And I just did a 320 squat, and my bench has always been weak, so it's 225 right now. I have a little bit of a slowing me down. And I'm proud of my overhead press. I just got 155 on the overhead press. And I still do the snatch and the clean and jerk, although I'm just doing baby girl weights on those. I have a 125-pound snatch, and I have a 140-pound clean and jerk.
Well, my dad has some way to go, and I've got a very long way to go then hearing that. But it gives us something to aim for.
Your dad is already in like the 95th percentile. I really have to get this on record. I think what you've done with them is such a beautiful thing, and you've done it not only for them, but you've done it to reach out to the world and show them what's possible. And it's just been, when I watch that video, I see this enormous exercise of filial duty and love, and you are to be congratulated.
Thank you. Do you know, I think that was the thing that we didn't recognize when we started out that has had such an impact on people, is that it's not only a strength story, really, it's a family story, and I see it in the comments every day, and that's what's so beautiful about it, is people who just sort of recognize that and say, I want to do this for my mum, or I wish I could have done it for my mum or my dad when they were alive. It's a lovely thing, really.
It really is.
It's been, it's a total pleasure to do it, but I just hope that we can inspire others. I know that we are inspiring others, but I would really love to see this become the norm, as I know you would. I would love to see it, and somehow we have to figure it out between us. Sully, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've loved it.
So have I. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, if you found that conversation with Dr. Sullivan as valuable as I did, please help it reach more people by liking this episode and sharing it with someone you think might appreciate it or benefit from hearing his insights too. I will link to his website and Instagram account in the description, and of course to his brilliant book, The Barbell Prescription, which is so worth reading. You'll find more inspiring and informative conversations like this one below too, along with a link to sign up to my newsletter where I round up all my latest episodes and articles around healthy aging, looking and feeling good for longer, so you don't miss a thing. But for now, thank you so much for being here today.